do. What is wrong? Alright, there we go. Alright. So I have decided that I need to start over on all my history knowledge. I've been going on too many assumptions of what I think I remember. And oh, this and that. And I hear people making these claims, and I'm like, that's wrong, but I can't really precisely remember. So I can't be like, nah, that's not it. So I'm going back. I'm restarting. I'm going back. I'm going to start on all this American Revolution, going back to the beginning, at least of American history. I'm not going all the way back. I was thought about starting with the 7 Years' War, but I think I'm going to just start with the American Revolution, restart on all my history knowledge. And I think I'm going to read some Common Sense and the Federalist Papers and just reread even the Constitution, just reread it all over again. Get it back fresh. Because I keep hearing these people make claims and ideas about like all this stuff, and then it's like, I know that's wrong, but I can't really remember. So yeah, that's why I'm doing all this. All right. I don't know if I should read this out loud or just see if anybody wants to talk. I can minimize that. And I know Wikipedia is not the best, but it's where I'm going to start. Oh. If anyone has a better idea of where to start, I'm all ears. If I can get all that going. All right. American Revolution was a rebellion political movement of the 13 colonies. I wonder if I should. It would be really great. So I need to get. I did. I already thought this through. I'm so much smarter than I thought I was. What I'd really like is to go through each colony from their perspective and like see like what were these, who are the leaders of each colony, and what were their ideas, because there was big divides during the American Revolution between all the different colonies, like arguing. You can see this a lot in the Federalist Papers. Of like, oh, are we like a collection of small republics that are confederated, or are we like a republic of republics? And it'd be interesting to see. It's like you kind of like hear, oh, this senator from blah blah blah, but it would be an interesting way to go about it. Of like, what was Virginia's or South Carolina's or New York's like idealing through all of this, especially Massachusetts. They were the most wild. All right. Leaders of the American Revolution were colonial separatist leaders who originally sought more autonomy as British subjects, but later assimilated to support the Revolutionary War, which ended British colonial rule over the colonies, establishing the independence of the United States in 1776. All right. This beginning thing is going to be all the basic stuff we all basically remember just from memory. some ideas that I'm just gonna go through the Wikipedia until I find something of like, all right, I've heard about this, but I need to know more, and then we're gonna go really hard into it. Discontent with colonial war began shortly after the defeat of the French in the French and Indian Wars, which was also just a part of the Seven Wars. This is why I was thinking, I was like, I should start with the 7 Years' War. But I think for what I'm going for, just knowing that France lost, George Washington was a general in it, and it made France and England have a lot of debt from this war. I think that's enough to know about the 7 Years' War. Besides that, I don't know almost anything about the 7 Years' War. All right. Parliament imposed new taxes to compensate for wartime costs and turned control of the colony's western lands over to the British officials in Montreal. Really? I did not know that. When? So they gave some land to the French, and oh wow. Representatives from several colonies convened the Stamp Act. Oh wow, I got a weird accent right there. The Stamp Act Congress. Its declarations of rights and grievances argued that taxation without representation violated their rights as Englishmen. In 1767, tensions flared again following the British Parliament's passage of the Townshend Acts. All right, so I know basically what the Stamp Act is, but I want to go things to go deeper. Stamp Act Congress. The Townshend Acts. I want to know exactly what these are. I know these, because you always hear about these things of, these are the things that really made these colonists mad and angry and upset, but exactly what they were, besides, taxes on tea and taxes on papers and transfers, don't know much more than that. In an effort to quell the mounting rebellion, King George III deployed troops to Boston. A local confrontation resulted in the troops killing protesters in the Boston Massacre, March 5th, 1770. In 1772, anti-tax demonstrations in Rhode Island destroyed the Royal Navy's custom schooner, the Gaspee. I wonder if that's right. Gaspee. The Gaspee Affair. That's another one. Schooner I know is like a small ship, but would a schooner just be a warship, or is it like a trading ship? Because that seems like different levels of schooner. These don't look very big, so they probably weren't warships. Anyway, we're just going off on an AD rant over there. On December 16th, 1773, activists disguised as Indians instigated the Boston Tea Party, dumped chests of tea owned by the British East India Company into Boston Harbor. London closed Boston Harbor and enacted a series of punitive laws which successfully ended self-government in Massachusetts. This was probably a big deal. Actually, the tea they threw into the harbor, they were like these dense, thick bricks of tea. Then they would you would shave off little things when you wanted to make tea from. So like you threw a case of tea, like you would think if it was like loose tea leaves, like oh whatever, but it was like they would condense down the tea leaves. I don't know in what process, but into these like super condensed bricks of tea. I wonder if I can get a picture of that. Tea from Boston Tea Party. See if they got any images of it. No. Tea brick, maybe. Yeah, there we go. They kind of look like this. You'd like shave off. I thought there was like segments as well. There, like these. You could. Oh, my dog's being crazy. You could sell them like this. Like, oh, this would be like a month's worth of tea because they were so condensed. So if you threw like a case, like this is not right. It wasn't loose like this. It's a misrepresentation. All right. In late 1774, 12 of the 13 colonies, Georgia joined later. Georgia's always been an outlier, but not as much as Rhode Island. Rhode Island is always, in a lot of these things, you're going to see like Rhode Island and Georgia like being like the pain in the butt ones. Began coordinating patriot resistances throughout underground networks of committees. In 1775, British forces attempted to disarm local militias around Boston and engaged them. That's a weirdly written sentence. And this was probably Concord and Lexington. All right. So this is telling me and appointing George Washington as commander-in-chief. In August, the king proclaimed Massachusetts to be a state in open defiance and rebellion. The Continental Army surrounded Boston. The British withdrew by sea in March 1776, leaving the Patriots in control in every colony. In 1776, the Second Continental Congress began to take a role of governing the new nation. It passed the Lee Resolution for national independence, adopted the Declaration of Independence, which embodied the political philosophies of liberalism and republicanism, and rejected monarchy and autocracy. All right. The fighting continued for 5 years, now known as the Revolutionary War. During that time, the kingdoms of France and Spain entered as allies on the sides of the United States. And that usually came down to an American and French armies captured the entire army in the siege of Yorktown, laid to a collapse of Parliament. Oh, man, I need to go this for the British side as well, because it is also bonkers. Bonkers. The defeat led to the collapse of King George's control of Parliament, with a majority now in favor of ending the war on American terms. On September 3rd, 1783, the British signed the Treaty of Paris, giving the United States nearly all the territory east of the Mississippi and south of the Great Lakes. About 60,000 loyalists migrated to other British territories in Canada and elsewhere. All right. So, the first thing I want to go over is I was thinking Common Sense by Thomas Paine, because this is like, if you read any of the writings or like notes, or one thing I understand about the founding fathers, they were writing down stuff all the time. And they all mention Thomas Paine. I'm guessing he will be mentioned in here. John Locke. That's another one I should read. Stonecraft Natural Rights. I don't think I would get any trouble for reading Thomas Paine and John Locke on stream. I don't think they'll hit me for copyright. I think that's pretty much in public domain at this point. But who else? John Locke. Okay. Common sense. What was... Alright, let's see. John Locke. I wonder if I need to read any of his stuff or if I could just get a Wikipedia coverage of his thing. Hobbes, too. No. Hobbes, Locke. And Paine. I think it's important to go over a lot of this stuff with everything that's kind of been happening now. Kind of this attack on self-governance of... It's good to kind of like go back and look of why people thought it was important. All right, so let's go back to the origins. Then we'll see. Let's just look at the origins. See if the Wikipedia page thinks there's anything important about them to read. 13 colonies were established in the 17th century as part of the English Empire. They were formed as part of the British Empire after the Union of England and Scotland in 1707. So, okay. So after that, doesn't matter to what we're looking for here. Puritan colonies of New England supported the Commonwealth government responsible for the execution of King Charles I. After the Stuart Revolution of 1680, Massachusetts did not recognize Charles II as a legitimate king for more than a year after his coronation. In the King Philip's War, New England colonies fought a handful of Native American tribes without military assistance from England, thereby contributing to the development of a unique American identity separate from the British people. This King Philip's War is actually a really big deal to understanding. There's a guy on YouTube, Atunche Films. He does a great series on this. This was the split. This is like kind of the starting of like people becoming American and not British. This is like where the division starts. All right, but I think I don't need to go over this. I think if anybody's more interested in that, go watch Atun Shea. He'll do a good job there. All right, in 1680s, Charles and his brother James II attempted to bring New England under direct English control. Ooh. The colonies fiercely opposed this. The crown nullified their colonial charters in response. Ooh. In 1686, James finalized his efforts by consolidating the separate New England colonies, along with New York and New Jersey, into a Dominion of England. Edmund Andros was appointed royal governor and tasked with governing of the new dominion under his direct rule. Colonial assemblies and town meetings were restricted, new taxes were levied, and rights were abridged. Dominion rule triggered bitter resentment throughout New England. When James tried to rule without parliament, the English autocracy removed him from power in the Glorious Revolution of 1688. We're going really far back. I don't want to get into English history, so I think the Wikipedia coverage is going to be enough for any of this English history stuff. Or I'll be going down infinite rabbit holes if I go through English history, which no way. This was followed in 1689. Boston Revolt, which overthrew Dominion rule. Colonial governments reasserted their control after the revolt. New monarchies, William and Mary, granted new charters to the individual New England colonies. Full local and democratic government was restored. So, there goes back. This is 100 years before the American Revolution. And there's already this tension between the colonies, especially in Massachusetts, which even to this day likes doing things their own way. And this kind of like tug and pull and give and take with the crown. But, all right. After the Glorious Revolution, the British Empire was a constitutional monarchy with sovereignty in the king in parliament. I need to look up this term. I don't know what this means. Aristocrats inherited seats in the House of Lords, while the gentry and merchants controlled the elected House of Commons, which is pretty, I don't know their system today, but it's still the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And I know the House of Commons is the elected one, and the House of Lords is this weird hybrid system, which I have no idea how it works. The British system is wild. Okay, this is just the term for... Okay. Proudly proclaimed the unwritten British Constitution, which guarantees the rights Englishmen protected personal liberty better than any other government. It served as a model for colonial governments. The Crown appointed a royal governor to execute power. Property owners elected colonial assembly with powers to legislate and levy taxes, but the British government resolved the right to veto colonial legislation. Radical Whig ideology profoundly influenced American political philosophy with its love of liberty and opposition to tyrannical government. So the Whigs. So I want to know this British Constitution. thing to look at later. The radical Whigs. I want to see where the Whigs land. Whoa. All right. After. Oh, I already read this one. All right. With little industry except shipbuilding, the colonies exported agriculture products to Britain in return for manufactured goods. This is pretty much the case with every British colony. It was seen as very exploitative to that the British had all the heavy industry, all the big expensive it's what all the like advanced countries like will do today is like, well, you can build all that's why they're exporting all this cheap, easy manufacturing out of this world, out of the first world countries, and doing like finished project, which is a lot more equitable than just this. You know, you can call it the same if you want, but yeah, you make a lot more money selling these like finished products than you ever will selling like these raw materials. It's a lot more lucrative and safe for your economies as well. They also imported molasses, rum, sugar from the British, and the British pursued a policy of mercantilism. This is another thing, mercantilism, that I feel is making a weird comeback in today's day and age. That it's this weird thing that it's like the precursor to capitalism without understanding the benefits of capitalism. Because the benefits of capitalism is growth and a growing economy. So there can be there's downsides to every system, and there's like good things to every system. The downside to mercantilism is that it's like capitalism without understanding trade. So that's a really like layman's way to put it, but it's like thinking like state, like, oh, we need to grow all our trade and thing and like keep everybody else down so that we have more power, without realizing that it'd be better for both of you if you could specialize, but it's kind of like specialization by force. But and now I feel like we're kind of moving back to more mercantilism, which is kind of terrifying. According to mercantilism, the colonies existed for the mother country's economic benefit. The colony's economic needs took a second place. Yeah, instead of seeing it as a mutual thing, it was a like, this trade needs to benefit me and not you. In 1651, Parliament passed the first series of navigation acts, which restricted colonial trade with foreign countries. This was a big deal. This was purely protectionism of the British, and purely to hurt the colonies. It probably hurt the British as well, because it meant their colony would grow slower. It was really, really, really stupid. The 13 colonies could not trade with the rest of the empire, but only ship certain commodities like tobacco to Britain. Any European imports bound for British America had to first pass through English ports to pay customs, which means they would have any customs that the colonies would have to pay would have to be on top of the English customs. Others laws regulated colonial industries such as the Wool Act, the Hat Act, and the Iron Act. Oh, I don't know. Should I go into each and every one of these acts? Come on, one viewer, you gotta have an opinion. Yeah, screw it. I'm gonna look at all these acts. All of these are just like, oh, America and Ireland. This is so typically British of just like just shooting themselves in the foot because they can't handle anything. They still do it today. They can't handle like, oh, not thinking they're the best at something. More protectionism. More protectionism. So, Wool Act, Hacked Act, just blatant protectionism to the detriment of everyone. The colonies can't trade with them. It's so silly. Pig and barn. See, it's like, hey, give us more raw iron. It's just so. It's so gross. Colonial reaction to these policies were mixed. The Molasses Acts of 1733 placed a duty of 6 pence per gallon upon foreign molasses imports into the colonies. This act was particularly egregious to New England colonists who protested it as taxation without representation. That's a first. The act increased the smuggling of foreign molasses, and British government ceased its enforcement after the 1740s. On the other hand, Miller. On the other hand, certain merchants and local industries benefited from the restrictions on foreign competition. This is a thing that is going to be very, very commonplace all the way up until the Civil War in America. And today, in other places, when you put a tax on imports, a tariff, you are definitionally playing favoritism. So, like right here, molasses. Like, so New England's probably not making a lot of molasses. So they're importing it. You put a tax on this. Prices of molasses goes up. You know, maybe all the sugar beet sellers, you know, they're like, oh yeah. So this is also you're playing favoritism. You're not letting even though people might prefer molasses, taxes are always a tool. They're not good, bad, or anything. They are just a tool. You don't know what they're going to do. If you don't know what they're going to do, don't do it. Oh, here, exactly what I was talking about. On the other hand, certain merchants and local industries benefited from the restrictions on foreign competition. The limits on foreign-built ships greatly... So this is one thing that tariffs are great at. If you want to build up an industry, having tariffs on it are a good thing to do. Because building up that industry is expensive, and it's hard. It's hard to catch up. So a lot of developing countries will put like oh, they really want to build up, like, we want to make glass bottles. It's going to take years for them to be competitive with like Coca-Cola. Like, we make glass bottles all the fucking time. It's no problem for us. You know, other country, they're like, well, we want to get in on that, but oh, man, they make them so cheap, but it's going to take us years and years of practice to get to that level of making them that cheap to be competitive. A tariff can be a good thing. You're like, all right, well, tariff it so you can catch up. Like, now that those Coca-Cola's making these glass bottles, now you are. If that makes any sense. If I need to draw that out in a better way, I will, if anybody asks. All right. But the political friction that the acts triggered was more serious, as the merchants most directly affected were also the most politically active. All right, the British lacking the resources and information needed to control the colonies. Instead, British officials negotiated and compromised with colonial leaders to gain compliance with imperial policies. The colonies defended themselves with colonial militias, and the British government rarely sent military forces before 1755. According to historian Robert Middlecoff, Americans had become almost completely self-governing before the American Revolution. That's a really good point. The trade-off is supposed to be with a colony is that, okay, we will give up a lot of our freedoms and our resources, but that means you have to be our daddy. Like, you have to protect us from all the big things. And the British hadn't been doing that for basically the entire time. Even during the French and Indian Wars. Yeah, okay, so during the French and Wars, the British government fielded 45,000 soldiers, half British, half colonial volunteers. The colonies also contributed money to the war effort. 2/5 of this spending was reimbursed by the government. But yeah, see, even half the dudes that were fighting on this part of the 7 Years' War were the colonies, were the American colonies. So it's like, all right, we're already doing half the lifting. This is the British War. It's anyway, continuing on. In 1763, Bute Ministry decided to permanently garrison 10,000 soldiers in North America. This would allow approximately politically well-connected British Army officials to remain on active duty with full pay. Stationing a standing army in Great Britain during peacetime was politically unacceptable. A standing army would provide defense against Native Americans in the West and had foreign populations in newly acquired territories. The French in Canada and Spanish in Florida. In addition, the British soldiers could prevent white colonists from instigating conflict with Native Americans and help collect custom duties. Migration beyond the Appalachian Mountains increased after the French threat was removed. Native Americans launched the Pontiac's War in response. The Greenville Ministry issued the Royal Proclamation of 1763, designating the territory between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River as an Indian reserve closed to white settlement. The proclamation failed to stop western migration while angering settlers, fur traders, and land speculators in the 13 colonies. Yeah, so that was such a failed idea because they didn't enforce it in any way. In no way did the British go, oh, no, you can't. They were just like, oh, don't go there, so when we won't help you. And so they felt betrayed twice because they're not being protected from the Indian tribes, and they're also saying you can't go there. And they're like, well, we're going to go there anyway, and then they'll be attacked, and they're like, then they'll feel betrayed by the British for not doing anything. The British, they were just so good at not doing stuff. They're so good at making declarations and then not doing anything to enforce them. That was their favorite thing. All right. Let's see. Leading up. I'm gonna get a copy of all these acts. The Navigation Acts. All the acts. Navigation Acts. Oh. I'm gonna write all these down. Wool Act. Hat Act. Iron Act. And we haven't gotten to more yet. We're not even to the 1760s yet. Protectionary tariff. Protectionary tariff. Actually, I need to go back and look at the Navigational Act, because that might be slightly different. That might... This seems like the worst one. It wasn't protectionary trade restrictions. friction. Probably if I spelled protectionary right, that might be better. I spelled, I think, like every fucking wrong except for trade right there. Oh, that was embarrassing. All the acts. All right. Oh, forgot one. Molasses Act. More acts. Tariff. How do I want to put this? Leaving the colonial military militias defense up to the colonies. X that only protected all right. All right, I think I will finally read Common Sense. This is what all the founding fathers fanboyed about. They loved Thomas Paine. Oh, my throat does kind of hurt. How many pages is this? It's like 100 pages, 85 pages. introduction. Oh, there's like no good breaks. Wait, is this not the whole? What is this? Is this not the entire document? I thought San Diego State. Do you have the whole one? Or am I just crazy? This has got to be, I guess. Alright, I'm just going to assume this is right. Alright. This is an introduction. Perhaps the sentiments contained in the following pages are not yet sufficiently fashionable to procure them general favor. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right, and raises at first a formidable outcry in defense of custom, but the tumult, I guess like tumultuous, soon subsides. Time makes more converts than reason. That's a good line. Holy shit, that is a good line. Time makes more converts than reason. As long as violent abuse of power is generally the means of calling the right of it in question, and the matters too which might never have been thought of had not the sufferers been aggravated in the inquiry, and did they censor this on purpose? I wonder. This is very curious. I'll have to go back. And as the key of England hath undertaken in his own right to support the parliament in which he calls theirs, and as the good people of this country are grievously oppressed by the combination, they have undoubted privilege to inquire into their pretensions of both, and equally to reject the usurpation of either. I don't know. It's like usurp. I need to look how to pronounce this.
Usurpation. Usurpation.
Okay, can we do this? Okay, I guess it's not normally an English word. In the following sheets, the author has studiously avoided everything which is personal among ourselves, complaints as well as censure to individuals to make no part thereof. The wise and the worthy need not triumph of the pamphlet, and those whose sentiments are how do you pronounce this?
Injudicious.
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 Injudicious. Or unfriendly will cease of themselves unless too much pains is bestowed upon their conversion. The cause of America is in great measure the cause of all mankind. Many circumstances have and that will arise which are not local but universal, and though which the principles of all lovers of mankind are affected, and in the event of which their affections are interested, the laying a country desolate with fire and sword, declaring war against the natural rights of all mankind. This is a phrase, the natural rights of all mankind, that are going to come from other, like Locke and Hobbes and stuff. Locke and Hobbes. And it and expatiating the defenders thereof from the face of the earth is the concern of every man, of whom nature hath given the power and feeling, of which class regardless of party censure, is the author. Have been delayed. I really like this opening line. Although this does give me kind of like a pick me tweet. Perhaps the sentiments contained in the following pages are not yet sufficiently fashionable. Like, I know this is not going to be popular. And I know everyone's going to hate this just because it's not the good thing to say. But this line of time makes more converts than reason, I really like that. Oh. All right, I think as long as the violent. Okay, but this really is just an introduction. My throat really hurts. I've been sick all week, but I'll read a little bit more. Of the origin and design of government in general, the concise remarks on the English Constitution. Some writers have so confounded society with government as to leave little or no distinction between them, whereas they are not only different, but have different origins. Society is produced by our wants, and the government by our wickedness. The former promotes our happiness and positivity by uniting our affections with the latter, negatively by restraining our vices. The one encourages intercourse, the other creates distinctions. The first is a patron, the latter is a punisher. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. So he's trying to make a big separation that government is this necessary evil to contain our wickednesses, but society is. So this is probably going to be very libertarian point of view. Let's just see, though. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is a necessary evil, and its worst state is an intolerable one. For when we suffer, we are exposed to the same miseries by a government, which we might expect in a country without government. This is going to go back to Hobbes and Locke of the state of nature thing, the all that good stuff. Whew. Our calamities is heightened by reflecting that we furnish the means by which we suffer. Government, like dress, is the badge of a lost innocence. The palaces of kings are built on the ruins of bowers of paradise? Bowers? I can't type at all.
Bowers.
I guess, okay. It is just bowers of paradise were the impulses of conscious, clear uniform and irresistibility obeyed man would need no other lawgiver, but that not being the case, he finds it necessary to surrender up a part of his property to finish means for this protection of the rest. And this he is induced to do by the same prudence which in every case advises him out of two evils to choose the least. Wherefore, security being the true design and end of government, is unanswerably follows that whatever form thereof appears most likely to ensure it to us with the least expense and the greatest benefit is preferred to all others. Okay, so class, what do we think he means by this? He's made it clear again that government is a necessary evil. This is kind of like, I guess, going back to Adam and Eve, that government, like dress, is a badge of lost innocence. That, it's kind of like a state of nature thing. Like, we have lost our innocence as people, so if we didn't have, if we weren't fucked up, we wouldn't need government. Security being the true design and end of government, it is unanswerable follows that whatever form thereof appears most likely to ensure it to us with the least expense and the greatest benefit. So, his main thing is government should have the least amount, the one that gives us the least amount of buy-in and giving up for the most amount of benefit is preferable to others. Seems okay. All right, this is his premise. Like this, that form of government, which takes the least and gives the most, is preferable. That's his starting. That's his premise. So, like, what would this be? That's how he would. That's his criteria for a good government. All right. I think I could do a little bit more before my throat finally gives out. In order to gain a clear and just idea of the design and end of government, let us suppose a small number of persons settled in some sequestered part of the earth, unconnected with the rest. They will then represent the first peopling of any country or of the world. In this state of natural liberty, society will be their first thought. All right, so he's starting us with the thought experiment. We're going to have a small number of people. They're all alone. So the government is not the first. The society is what they will first think of. What is their society? 1,000 motives will excite them thereto. The strength of one man is so unequal to his wants, and his mind is so unfitted for the perpetual solitude that he soon obliged to seek assistance and relief of another, who in turn requires the same. 4 or 5 united would be able to raise a tolerable dwelling in the midst of the wilderness, but one man might labor out of the common period of life without accomplishing anything. When he felled his timber, he could not remove it, nor erect it after it was removed. Hunger, in the meantime, would urge him to quit his work, and every different want would call him a different way. Disease, nay, even misfortune, would be death, for though neither might be mortal, yet either would disable him from living, and reduce him to a state in which he rather be said to perish than to die. Okay, so he's expecting, like, all right, what happened? State of nature. Thus, necessity, like gravitating power, would soon form our newly arrived immigrants to society. The I'm having a hard time speaking. Reciprocal blessings of which would supersede, and the rendering of obligations of law and government unnecessary, while they remain perfectly just to each other. But as nothing but heaven is impregnable to vice, it will unavoidably happen that in proportion as they surmount the first difficulties of immigration, which bound them together in common cause, they will begin to relax in their duty and attachment to each other, and thus remissness will point out. How do I pronounce this? This is bothering me so much.
Remiss.
It's just remissness will point out the necessity of establishing some form of government to supply the defect in moral virtue. Okay. So he's going that basically just being people, dealing with people, that there will be some sort of that the proportional exchange that will become unproportional, and there'll be need some kind of movement of owing, power imbalance, but obligations to each other that will happen no matter what. All right. Some convenient tree will afford them state house, under the branches of which the whole colony may assemble to deliberate on public matters. It is more than probable that their first laws will have the titles only of regulations, to be enforced by no other penalty than public disesteem. In the first parliament, every man, by natural right, will have a seat. So, the first laws will just be like, hey, don't do these guys. These are how to keep things going smoothly. But as this colony increases, public concerns will increase likewise, and the distance at which these members may be separated will render too inconvenient for all of them to meet on every occasion. As at first, when their numbers was small, their habitations near, and the public concerns few and trifling, this will point out the convenience of their consenting to leave the legislative part to be managed by a select number from the whole body, who are supposed to have the same concerns at stake which those who have been appointed them, and who will act in the same manner as the whole would as if they were present. So this is kind of the first, like, okay, this is the beginning of representative democracy. Idea is like, all right, we don't need to all be here for this. Like, we'll do, like, John and Sam and Billy and Joan. They all know what we all think, and they can handle and work out the problems. We don't all need to be here. If the colony continue increasing, it will become necessary to augment the number of representatives, and that interest of every part of the colony may be attended to. It will be found best to divide the whole into convenient parts, each part sending its proper number, and that the elected might never form themselves into interests separate from the electors. Prudence will point out that the propriety of having elections often, because they are elected, as the elected might by... Okay. The way you write sometimes tongue twists me. Let's go back a little bit. If the colony continue increasing, it will become necessary to augment the number of representatives that the interest of every part of the colony may be intended to. More people, you're going to need more representatives. It will be found best to divide the whole in convenient parts, different states and territories and blah, blah, blah. Each part sending its proper number, and that the elected, the representatives, might never form to themselves an interest separate from the electors, the people that elect the electors. Prudence will point out that the propriety of having elections often, because the elected might by that means return and mix again with the general body of electors. So propriety of having elections often. So more often elections means that the elected, your representatives, would have to come back and mix again with the people that elected them. So, this is like getting your senators to come back to the state. Whew. See the people and not just spend all their time in Washington, like people complain about all the time. Their fidelity to the public will be secured by the prudent reflection of not making a rod for themselves. Paine is replying to the proverb, spare the rod and spoil the child. He uses this reference to a rod to assess that the elected will be careful to represent the interests of the electors to avoid being punished with a metaphysical rod, or in our modern times, losing re-election. And as this frequent interchange will establish a common interest with every part of the community, they will mutually and naturally support each other on this, not on the unmeaning name of king. Depends on the strength of government and the happiness of the governed. Whew. Cool. All right. Here then is the origin and rise of government, namely a mode rendered necessary by the inability of moral virtue to govern the world. Here too is the design and end of government, viz. Freedom and security. I don't know what this abbreviation is. And however our eyes may be dazzled with show or our ears deceived by sound, however prejudice may warp our wills or interest darken our understanding, the simple voice of nature and reason will say, it is right. Okay, here is the origin and rise of government. So this is how government starts, he's saying. A mode rendered necessary by the inability of moral virtue to govern the world. So morals alone can't govern. You need some sort of system. And however we may be tricked or lied to, or our prejudice will warp our wills, voice of nature and reason will say, it is right. Okay. I draw my idea of the form of government from the principle in nature which no art can overturn, viz. I don't understand what this abbreviation is. Viz. That is to say. Okay. I draw my idea from the form of government from a principle in nature which no art thou could overturn. There is to say that the more simple anything is, the less liable it is to be disordered, and the easier repaired when disordered. And with this maximum, I offer a few remarks on the such boasted Constitution of England. That it was noble for the dark and slavish times in which it was erected, is granted, which when the world was overrun with tyranny, the least removed therefrom was a glorious rescue, but that it is imperfect, subject to convulsions, and incapable of producing what it seems to promise, is easily demonstrated. Jesus Christ. I'm getting tired, I guess. Absolute governments, though the disgrace of human nature, have this advantage. With them, they are simple. If their people suffer, they know the head from which their suffering springs. Know likewise the remedy, and are not bewildering by the variety of causes and cures. By the Constitution of England, it is so exceedingly complex that the nation may suffer for years together without being able to discover which part the fault lies. Some will say in one and some in another. And every political physician will advise a different medicine. All right. 10 more minutes. Let's do an hour and a half. And I think that's good enough for a day that I'm sick on. I know it is difficult to get over local or long-standing prejudices, yet if we will suffer ourselves to examine the component parts of the English Constitution, we shall find them to be the base remains of two ancient tyrannies, compounded with some new republican materials. First, the remains of monarchical tyranny in the person of the king, the remains of aristocratical tyranny in the persons of the peers. Thirdly, the new republican materials, in which the persons of the commons, on whose virtue depends the freedom of England. The two first, by being hereditary, are independent of the people, whereas the constitutional sense they contribute nothing towards the freedom of the state. So because these are hereditary and have no connection to the people, they are non-contributing towards the freedom of the state. You can say that the Constitution of England is a union of three powers, which are checking on each other, is farcical. Either the words have no meaning or they are flat contradictions. God damn, that's a fucking 1700s burn. They are farcical and have no meaning, or they are flat contradictions. God damn, Thomas Paine. Calm down on your burns. To say that the Commons is a check upon the king pre-proposes two things. First, that the king is not to be trusted without being looked after. Or it is, in other words, that the thirst for absolute power is the natural disease of monarchy. Secondly, that the Commons, by being appointed for the purpose, are either wiser or more worthy of confidence than the crown. But the same constitution which gives the Commons a power to check the king by withholding supplies gives afterward the king a power to check the Commons by empowering him to reject their other bills. It again supposes the king is wiser than those whom have already supposed to be wiser than him. A mere absurdity! Exclamation point. I like that. I like this. I like the way this guy writes, even though he some kind gets me tongues twisted. Oh. Oh. What's the date today? All right. Okay. Which gives the Commons a power to check the king without... There is something exceedingly ridiculous in the composition of monarchy. It excludes a man from the means of information, yet empowers him to act in cases where the highest judgment is required. The state of kings shuts him from the world, yet the business of king requires him to know thoroughly, wherefore the different parts, unnaturally opposing and destroying each other, prove the whole character to be absurd and useless. So he's saying, like, the state of king, if to be a king you have to be shut off from the world, yet giving him this executive power is ridiculous and useless because he doesn't know what it takes to make these laws, and giving him this law, so it's silly. Which, again, true. So to be a king is to be separate. Some writers have explained the English Constitution thus: the king, say they, is one, the people another, the peers are a house in behalf of the king, the common is in behalf of the people, but this hath all the distinctions of a house divided against itself. And though expressions be pleasantly arranged, yet when examined they appear idle and ambiguous. It will always happen that the nicest contradiction that words are capable of when applied to the description of something which that cannot exist or is too incomprehensible to be within the compass of description will be words of sound only, and though they may amuse the ear, they cannot inform the mind. For this explanation includes previous questions. How can the king, by power which the people are afraid to trust and always obliged to check? So why give the king power if the people are afraid to actually give him this power and they're always having to oblige and check on it? Such a power cannot be the gift of wise people, neither can any power which needs checking be from God. Yet the provision which the Constitution makes supposes such a power to exist. Okay. He's just shitting on the English right now, which is fun, but doesn't pertain much to what I'm looking for. Oh. I should make some tea. My throat is killing me. I didn't mean to click on that. All right. But the provisions is unequal to the task. The mean either cannot or will not accomplish the end. The whole affair is something in a foreign language. Fellow literally refers to the suicide or self-murder. Paine uses this term figuratively as a synonym for absurdity. He's just in this paragraph that one in proceeds the English Constitution. Okay, so as kids would say, self-deletes. Provisions are unequal to the task. The means either cannot or will not accomplish the ends. The whole affair is self-defeating. For the greater weight will always be carry up the less, and as all the wheels of a machine are put into motion by one, it only remains to know which power in the Constitution has the most weight, for that will govern. And though the others, or a part of them, may clog, or as the phrase is, check the rapidity of its motion, yet so long as they cannot stop it, their endeavors will be ineffectual. The first moving power will always at last have its way, and what it wants in speed is supplied by time. Okay. So what he's going out here is that, because he's talking about the English Constitution and how they have these, the king, the upper house and the lower house, and it's like, he's like, as long as these are, you could split up these powers, but the one that has the most power in the Constitution, the other two can like slow it down, but that's it. They're not going to have they're just going to be ineffectual, like, and pointless. That's why I'm sure he's going to go on to talk about equivalent separations of powers. How do I... Anyway, that the crown is overbearing part of the English Constitution need not be mentioned, and that it deserves its whole consequence merely of being the giver of places and pensions is self-evident. Wherefore, though we have been wise enough to shut and lock a door against absolute monarchy, we have at the same time been foolish enough to put a crown in possession of the key. The prejudice of Englishmen in favor of their own government by king, lord, and commons arises as much or more from national pride than reason. Individuals are undoubtedly safer in England than in some other countries, but the will of the king is as much the law of the land in Britain as in France, with the difference that instead of proceeding directly from his mouth, it is handed to the people under the formidable shape of an act of parliament. For the fate of Charles I hath only made kings more subtle, not more just. So he's saying that, yeah, this is not that much different from just having a regular old monarch. You're just adding more steps. It's just monarchy with extra steps. Whereas laying aside the national pride and prejudice in favor of modes and forms, the plain truth is that it is wholly owning to the constitution of the people and not the constitution of the government that the crown is not the oppressive in England as it is in Turkey. An inquiry into the constitutional errors in the English form of government is at this time highly necessary, for we are never in the proper condition of doing justice to others while we continue under the influence of some leading part. I don't know this word. Or maybe I'm just getting really tired.
Partiality.
Partiality, okay. So neither we are capable of doing so. It is to ourselves while we remain fettered by any... hey, puppy. What's up, doggy? By any obstinate prejudice. And as man who is attached to a prostitute is unfitted to choose or judge of a wife, so any preposition in favor of a rotten constitution of government will disable us from discerning a good one. Wow. This guy, you know, I feel like I might have read this in high school. But reading this now, this guy is sassy. All right. I think I'm too sick to read any more of this tonight. I will be back on tomorrow after I get off work. Maybe I can get a few people interested in learning about some stuff. All right. Thanks to my one viewer. Oh, I have two now. Oh, maybe I should read a little bit more if anybody's interested. But, screw it. I'll read another bit. Going through Thomas Paine's fanfic of all the founding fathers, where he's just been trash talking the English to no end, which has been highly entertaining. All right. Part 2 of Monarchy and Hereditary Succession. Oh. Mankind being original equals to the order of creation, the equality could only be destroyed by some subsequent circumstance. The distinction of rich and poor may in a great measure be accounted for, and that without having recourse to the harsh, ill-sounding names of oppression and avarice. Oppression is often the consequence, but seldom, never the means of riches. And although avarice will preserve a man from being This is this. Why? The later I get, the worse I am at pronouncing. Nastitiously poor. It generally makes him too timorous to be wealthy. All right. So again, he's going back to the state of nature thing. Oppression is often the consequence, but seldom or never the means of riches. So he's saying, like, let's see, let's try to parse this out of what he's exactly going for here. The distinction of rich and poor may be of great measure, but accounting for that without having recourse the harsh ill-sounding names of oppression and avarice. Oppression is often the consequences, but seldom never the means of riches. So oppression is the consequence, but not because of riches. It's just a consequence of it. And although avarice will preserve man from being necessary poor, it will generally make him too timorous to be wealthy. But there's another and greater distinction from which no truly natural or religious reason can be assigned, and that is the distinction of men into kings and subjects. Why is this capitalized? Male and female are the distinctions of nature. Good and bad are the distinctions of heaven. But how a race of man came into the world so exalted above the rest and distinguishing like so new species is worth inquiring into, and whether they are the means of happiness in the measures. So I don't think I'm going to bother too much of what he's talking about right here. He's going back into Hobbes and Locke. More into which we can talk more into that when he goes into that. I want him going back to trash talking the English. That was a lot more entertaining. In the early ages of the world, according to scripture chronology, there were no kings, the consequence of which was there were no wars. Which is a really funny line. There were no kings, and of consequence, there were no wars. This is the pride of kings which throws mankind into confusion. Holland, without a king, hath enjoyed more peace for its last century than any of the monarchical governments in Europe. Antiquity favors the same remark, for the quiet and rural lives of the first patriarchs have a happy something in them, which vanishes when come the history of Jewish royalty. He's going to... It is not a anti-Semitic thing. He is talking about the history in the Bible. Government by kings was first introduced to the world by the heathens, from whom the children of Israel copied the custom. It was the most prosperous invention the devil had ever set foot for the promotion of idolatry. Except for, that's what he's saying here, the heathens paid divine honors to their deceased kings, and the Christian world hath improved upon the plan by doing the same by their living ones. So he was kind of throwing some shade at Europe here, like the heathen, those horrible heathens. They paid all these honors to their deceased kings, and here come us, the Christian. We have improved on this plan by doing the same thing to the ones that are alive. What a big jump! He is making fun of all the monarchists. How impious is the title of sacred majesty applied to a worm who hath in the midst of his splendor is crumbling into dust. This is such a good line. I don't think as the exalting one man is so greatly above the rest cannot be justified on the equal rights of nature, so neither can it be defended on the authority of Scripture. For the will of the Almighty, as it declared by Gideon and the prophet Samuel, expressly disapproves of government of kings. All monarchical parts of Scripture have been very smoothly glossed over in monarchical governments, but they undoubtedly merit the attention of countries which have their governments yet to form. Render unto Caesar the things that which are Caesar's is the scriptural doctrine of courts, yet it has no support of monarchical government. For the Jews at the time were without a king in the state of vassalage of Romans. Near 3,000 years have passed away. So this is just his religious argument against things. Near 3,000 years have passed away from Mosaic account of the creation till the Jews, under national delusion, requested a king. Till their form of government, except for majority cases that are already proposed. I'm going to start skipping the religious argument because I don't think this is going to hold up in today's, like, oh, well, the Bible says that monarchies are bad. Oh wow, it's going on for a while. All right, that's it. I'm done. That's a good place to stop. I hope my one viewer got something out of this and can take into the world. I hope you have a good night. I had fun reading this stuff.